Hi there, it's Gabriele Nicolet from SpeechKids, where we help little kids learn how to talk and we help parents learn what to say to their little kids. And today we're going to talk all things homeschool with Keisha Berry, who I have the good fortune to work with at SpeechKids. She's one of our star therapists. And Keisha, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
And part of the reason you're here is because you homeschool and have homeschooled your kids for, you just said, about 10 years now. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
So why did you decide to homeschool your kids?
So a very interesting story. So I actually started off my career as a teacher. So I was a special education teacher. And my son kind of got to this fork in the road where we needed to make a decision about what his education was going to look like. He was a super smart kid, and, you know, being in the classroom with the structure and, you know, having to sit and be still and listen, those things weren't quite working for him. So we explored different schools, different types of schools, whether it was Montessori or whether it was a little bit more hands-on and environmentally centered with less structure. And we ended up landing on homeschool as a decision. And it was supposed to be a temporary thing. Back then he was headed to the second grade, and now he is a junior in high school. So it was supposed to be a temporary thing, but we've kind of stuck with it for about 10 years now.
Wow. Okay. And you now have other children as well.
I do. So I have a junior in high school. I have a rising second grader and a rising kindergarten student, and then a little baby. She's only 8 months.
Okay. So you've got this whole spectrum of experience. So what do I want to ask you about this? Like, what was surprising to you when you started homeschooling?
That's a good question. I think I was surprised by how flexible it is, right? Like, I think that I was expecting somebody to tell me what to do every day. Like, you know, there would be somebody who would check up on me and make sure I'm doing, you know, A through Z and, you know, dotting my I's and crossing my T's. You know, I expected to wake up every day at 8 and homeschool through 3 o'clock. And I was surprised. That was a very unrealistic expectation to do that when you're at home. And so our homeschool 2 days during the week that look the same. But the kids are learning, and I think that's most important. So for sure, what homeschooling looks like was the most surprising thing to me.
Okay. And you mentioned, like, you thought you were going to do school, like regular school, where you are learning from 8 to 3. And so I know you just said like every day is different, but can you give us a sample and skew it young, since most of the people watching this will have younger kids. So second grade or under, what does homeschool even look like for that population?
Absolutely. So everybody has a schedule. That's the first thing. And so, you know, I'm still a working mom. And so one thing that was really, really important for us is I kind of look at my work week and I match it to what it is that they're going to be doing. So if I know that there's certain days where I'm going to be more busier than others, those are the days where I plan for them to be a little bit more independent. If I know that there are days where I'm going to have a lot of time, I only have 1 or 2 meetings, those are the days that I plan to be really, really hands-on. Everybody has a schedule, even the baby. The baby has a schedule more so for the older kids because, you know, otherwise it's, why do I have to do that? And she doesn't have to do anything. So the baby, I have pictures of like sleeping, eating, sleeping, eating, sleeping, eating. And that's what she does all day. But having a schedule was very, very important to start with. And the homeschooling really fits what I need. So it's not based on a curriculum. It's not based on what someone is telling me. It's based on what are the needs of my family, what we're doing for that day. And that's kind of how we set up our homeschooling on a week-to-week basis. And literally, I look at homeschooling from week to week. I don't try to look from September to June. I look at it on Sunday, what I want to accomplish this week.
Interesting. I loved what you said. You just slipped it in there that the baby has a picture schedule. Can you talk a little bit more about like what does the schedule actually look like for your maybe a
So,
non-reader?
yeah, so with pictures, and before my kids could read, they read with pictures, if that makes sense. So my 4-year-old, who's not is not an efficient or, she's very early in her stages of reading. And so everybody has pictures except for the high schooler. But, for reading, there's a picture of a book. For math, there's a picture of a plus and minus sign. We even have PE in there. And for us, PE, I mean, now during the days that we're in, for us, PE is doing yoga on YouTube. So the girls know that, or, they may ask, can we go outside for PE? They usually play sports during the, so they have their practice gear that they can pull out of the garage and go outside and do that, or ride bikes. There's also, science time, and there's a picture of a little test tube. So there are pictures that represent something that they recognize what it is that they're supposed to be doing. And that helps me, because otherwise every 5 minutes somebody would say, what do I do next? I'm done. What do I do next? I'm done. So they know they have their schedules and they check it off.
And you've sort of baked that into the process, which
Yes.
how much do you feel like your teacher training, I'm imagining, because we're in a global pandemic, some kids are some parents are considering homeschooling their kids. And at the same time that they're deciding that, they're saying, oh, what have I done? I'm not a teacher. So can you speak to a little bit about, like, do you have to be a teacher to homeschool?
That's a really good question, because I think when I apply my skills as a teacher, I can very easily apply those to other children. And so it's very easy to assume that because my background was teaching, that I just magically knew what to do with my own kids. So a couple of things. Number one, when you're homeschooling, it's not in the context of a school environment where I can ask the teacher that's next door, hey, what do you do with this? Or, I can go downstairs and find resources, or, so I really did have to piece together learning resources and a plan for my own kids. The great thing about homeschooling is that the people that make resources for homeschoolers know that most parents aren't teachers. Literally, there are the curriculums that you use in school, and then those same curriculums, there's often a homeschool version. There's a teacher's guide, and literally you just have to read what's in bold. It tells you exactly what to say. It tells you exactly what your kids should say. It tells you what to do if they don't say the right thing. So you can really, really get resources and tools where you don't have to be a teacher. The programs and the teaching resources and materials, they do those for you.
Yep. Do you do any kind of co-op with your kids? I know sometimes people band together to either hire a subject matter teacher or for other group activities. What's your experience with that?
So we do. So over the course of 10 years, we've done a little bit of everything. So we've done co-ops where the kids do their extracurricular activities. And oftentimes the co-ops are run by parents. So that's not new. The awesome thing about homeschooling is that you have parents with all sorts of backgrounds, and sometimes classes are made just based on what those parents do. So if somebody is a contractor, we may do carpentry. If somebody was on a tennis scholarship when they were in college and they can still play a little bit of tennis, we offer tennis lessons. And so we've done co-ops where the kids have done, music classes, and they've done sports, they've done art classes. And then I
want to stop you for a second, because all those things that you just listed are, number one, things that are either not offered or not offered well at a public school, for example, maybe at a private school, yes, but also are exceptionally good activities for kids who are not good at school or who don't like school, because guess what? School is not a good place for them. And so I feel like, everything you just said, I was like, oh yeah, if I had a kid who was miserable at school because he had to sit down all day, and then I could say, I'm going to teach you carpentry, they'd be all over that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And another thing that I think is important for families to know is that, homeschooling homeschooling is not a version of school at home, right? So, and it's a paradigm shift where you have to kind of shift in your mind. But you know, if you decide to bake with your kid, guess what? That's reading. You know, so we're working on literacy skills. That's measuring. So we're working on math skills. You know, jot down the things you need from the grocery list. That's handwriting and writing skills. If you're making a food, you know, from another culture, that could potentially be social studies and geography. So there's a lot that you probably already do that's actually homeschooling. It's just that, you know, for parents transitioning during this time, you're used to your kid going to school and having a teacher, but you're probably doing a lot at home. You just don't mean it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think you said something really apt, I think, which is, you know, it requires a paradigm shift. It is not business as usual. Nothing is business as usual right now. So, you know,
Yeah.
if we're gonna take the package out and sort of shake it around and see what's broken, there are a lot of things that are broken right now.
Yeah.
And so if one of those things is, you know, my child, particularly I think for parents whose children were unhappy in school before, it's a really interesting opportunity, if you can let it be,
Right.
for some innovation and some change.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not without problems. And I do want to mention, you know, sort of this tension between public education and, you know, when you decide to homeschool, your neighborhood school no longer gets those funds that they would get if your student was there. So there's a funding thing that's involved. Having said that, you know, I am not somebody who's prepared to sacrifice their child's education at the altar of the system.
Right.
So if,
Right.
you know, for people who are also feeling that sort of conflict, you know, what you're mapping out is, I think, could be very attractive for people.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that people, I think that once you decide to do, the hardest part about homeschooling is deciding to do it.
Yeah.
Like the hardest part for a lot of families that they're facing today is literally deciding to do it. But once you decide to do it, I think that once you dive into it a little bit, you'll sort of have a breath of fresh air. If you can take a moment to breathe. And I say that because a lot of families, if you actually take a look at what kids should know by the end of the school year, a lot of families already don't have a problem because many of their children are well into what they should know at age. You know, and another thing that parents can do, especially for those that know that this is going to be temporary, I say ask your school what they expect their kid to know by the end of the school year. Or the way to work backwards is ask them for an end of the year test. Like, you know, that you have end of the year test in reading, end of the year test in math. Ask them if your child's going in the 4th grade, can you have an end of the year math test from the 4th grade teacher so that you can see what your student is expected to learn, and then you can work from there. But it definitely, I understand that it can feel overwhelming, but I think you have to get into it.
Mm-hmm. How did you, can you speak a little bit to how you came to that decision, to the extent that you remember 10 years ago?
Came to the decision to homeschool?
Yeah.
It was a hard decision because I thought that I was going to be a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to walk into a classroom every day. I never thought that it would end up being me teaching my own child, but I think that the way that schools tend to operate, it just wasn't a great fit for him. He was one of those kids, like you, he was young, he was 6, and he was young, he was 6, and he just wasn't happy. So his happiness was very important because, you know, I know he's going to learn how to write a sentence eventually. I want him to be happy while he's learning to do this. And so, you know, after looking at other schools, you know, we sat down and we talked about, you know, this is what we need to do. You know, and he can do math upside down on the steps. And guess what? If he's really, really tired one morning, or if we stay up late at night, we're no longer restricted to having to get up out the house at 7:15. He can sleep in. Because when you homeschool, you don't have to start school at 8. If you need to start at 11, then you start at 11. And guess what? If he's having a bad day, we don't have to do anything.
See, now this is exactly, and you know this about SpeechKids as a practice, which is we want to like get to know the people who they are, right? Like we want the kids to be themselves. We want to help people become more themselves.
Yes.
And when you take somebody like your son or any number of kids who are in public school and you try to make them all the same, it works for many, many children. And it does not work. And it works really well for some, and it works okay for some. And there's a subset of kids, I think it's probably about 20% of kids, maybe, you know, a little bit less, for whom it is a bad thing.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And to have that flexibility, and again, I say this not because I'm trying to make anybody's mind up for them, because everybody has to go deep within themselves and talk to their partners if they have them and make this decision for themselves. But I will say, for kids who were unhappy at school before, keeping them home and not making them do, I've heard it called Franken school, right, where they have to show up on Zoom, which is a whole other thing. It can be a really good option.
Yeah. And when you think about young children having to be in class on Zoom, so I have a 4-year-old, and you know, we're practicing because this fall, even with some of our co-ops are going online, and so we're trying to practice sitting for 15 minutes. Okay, so and this is practice, and you know, I'm a therapist and I'm supposed to help families help their kids, but 15 minutes, it's hard. It's really hard. Children, they're not programmed to sit in front of a computer screen, you know, and learn that way. So it's really, really hard. So, you know, and like you said, I think parents have to make their own decision. But if there is an opportunity to really, really make learning about who your child is and how they learn, that's a great thing. Because one of the first questions a lot of people ask me is, what's the best curriculum? And we have to back up, because that's not the first question to ask, because my questions are, what's your child's learning style? What does your work schedule look like? How independent can he or she be? You know, how many hours per day, or how much time do you think that, you know, your child can sit and focus on a task? Those are the important questions to ask. And then you go for what programs and curriculum are going to be the best fit.
So if people want to learn more about homeschooling, or like, I don't know if there are mentors, like what, if somebody's saying like, okay, I think this is for me, what do I do next? So
there are so many resources for homeschooling now that were available when I started, but there are, you know, Facebook groups, you know, that have started. There are Facebook groups where, you know, the admin on the groups are connecting certified teachers with families, where teachers are posting, you know, what they have to offer. There are homeschool consultants. So literally, if you just do a Google search for local homeschooling research, local homeschooling resources, never before, they're there. Okay. I mean, I've even seen it on the news, you know, local people that, you know, we've known for years, you know, are on the news giving families advice. And so I do think that it's important to pair up, you know, and not do it alone. So if you find some other people in your neighborhood, it's a great opportunity. Parents need to support each other. That's important, but also so that kids can still have some interaction.
Yeah. Wow, Keisha, this has been fantastic. I thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.